Welcome to the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, your weekly look at conservation and sporting community news happening across the nation and on the Hill. Thanks for tuning in. This is the TSV Roundup. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to this weekly edition of the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, your weekly look at conservation news from across the nation for this Independence Week. Happy Independence, America. With that, we're going to bring you some of the good work of the CSF team here and bring you headlines from across the nation. Our lead story: Colorado is up to it again, folks. Fur ban advances in Colorado. Marie Newmiller joins us once again to talk about all the happy news in the West. Before we get to Marie, we'll check out some of the headlines from across the nation. In Delaware, the legislator is working to expand hunting and shooting opportunities for young sportsmen and women. And what we're doing here is looking to um, alleviate the burden of, for lack of a better term, babysitter for youth hunters. Well, they wouldn't be youth hunters at this point. If this passes, 16 and 17 years old, this would work without the supervision of someone 21 years or older, as long as they have met their prerequisites and are properly licensed. So, a good opportunity here as the legislative session comes to an end for the first half of Delaware in 2026. You can check that out, and hopefully, as this podcast drops, we'll have some answers for you by next week on what happened as Delaware wraps things up ahead of this podcast drop. In North Carolina, Connor Barker brings us an article about our support, CSF support for Land and Water Fund. The Land and Water Fund was first established in the mid 90s and is focused on protecting and restoring water resources, but was later expanded in 2013 to conserve natural, cultural, and historic resources and lands critical to the military. This fund has contributed significantly to North Carolina's game land protection. In fact, it has provided funding that helped contribute 350,000 acres on 50 game lands throughout the state. Point of interest here: for every dollar spent, the state leverages $2 from private, federal, state, and local governments, making the NCLWF very efficient and effective way to delivering results that benefit hunter, anglers, and other outdoor recreationalists. So check that article out from Connor. Learn more about that, especially if you're from North Carolina, and how to support that. And finally, in the Midwest, it's Pollinator Week. Bob Matthews brings us an article and write up about some of the original conservationists and our little busy bee friends and the like, who perform a very big job despite their very small stature, and the importance of native grasses, native flowers, and encouraging those little workers to do so much good work for everything around us in the natural world. So you can check that out as well, and keep in mind when you're doing your yard work this year, maybe leave some of the wildflowers and some of that clover flower around, and help them pollinators. Um, with that, short week, short stories here, but I suspect our lead story is going to take up quite a bit. As I mentioned at the top, fur ban advances. Marie, we kind of talked about the looking into the future back in the end of the election cycle in 24, when Denver tried this locally. Now we're looking at a statewide effort to ban the sale, trade, and barter of Colorado sourced fur products. Bring us up to date on where we're at in this process, what this means for Coloradans, trappers, and folks that would use these products, and ultimately, the ramifications of this outside of
Yes, and thank you, Fred, for having us on the podcast today.
Colorado. Hmm.
Um, this started as a citizen petition filed to the commission. It came from a lot of the same players who brought us the ballot measure last year to ban the hunting of large cats, including mountain lions and bobcats. What they've proposed now to the Fish and Wildlife Commission is to ban the retail sale of wild furs in Colorado from any animal that was harvested in the wild in Colorado.
Mhm.
The commission heard this petition during their March meeting. It was a meeting that we had a staff member there testifying in opposition, but the commission did adopt to move further with rulemaking. And right now, the Colorado Fish, Wildlife, and Parks has put out an intent for rulemaking notice. We haven't seen the official language yet, but it does look like the commission will be hearing this and voting on it in July.
What's changed since the last election cycle to this rulemaking cycle? And I ask because with the work of the Wildlife Council, as well as the department professionals coming out against this and saying, proper wildlife management includes X, Y, and Z, and this is a byproduct of implementing those best management practices and putting wildlife management on the ground. And because of those relationships and that first person testimony to the public, people trusted the department and said, "Yeah, I'm not in favor of this." And the same thing with the cats. And they voted those measures down. What's changed? Why? I guess procedurally, and I don't know what is the department's responsibility to petitions? Do they have to take them up? Is there rules on that, or can they dismiss them? It just seems like this is a pretty big about face to even entertain something so ridiculous.
Yeah. So the Colorado Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, they brought the petition as it was presented to them, and they gave a presentation to the overall commission. Fish, Wildlife, and Parks themselves, or FWP in Colorado, had recommended denial of the petition for several reasons. First, that it goes against their science based management as well as the North American model, but also because it conflicts with some state laws. There's some agricultural laws that do allow for the sale of furs gathered as a part of conflict mitigation.
Hmm.
So it would put them in violation of several state statutes, which the commission itself cannot do. One of the things we're seeing is that commission appointments are coming from the governor's office. That's the way it's structured in Colorado. And
Hmm.
there have been some recent appointments that were pretty controversial that the governor had put through to the point that even the Senate had declined several of the governor's
Right.
appointments. So we've seen a lot of political turmoil around those seats in Colorado.
And I think this extends to the governor and his family's bias, as I understand it there. So, if you're in Colorado, maybe you know. If you're not in Colorado, the governor's partner is vehemently opposed to any of this. I goes as far as I think practices veganism. So, whatever, eat whatever you want, but taking a personal interest in this and affecting the entirety of a state like Colorado was such a deep rooted tradition where so much of ecotourism, out of state hunting, and just non resident money that comes in a big way into that state. This is just one of those dominoes that once it falls, you start going after the other stuff. And we always talk about when it comes to trapping and fur handling and using these renewable products, it's always the low hanging fruit that these antis come after. And once again, we're doing this dance. You know, going back to golly days, what was it, March, Marie, when SD, the online shopping center, was pressured into immediately putting a stop to all sales of fur products, which not only did it affect the trapper per se, which is what people have a burr under their saddle for these antis. It affected native populations, indigenous people that use these products, that sell these products as part of their culture, as well as revenue generating for their own personal income and their communities. It goes outside and affects the angling community, very large and passionate group of fly fishermen, purists out there in Colorado, throughout the Rockies, and those that travel to visit by way of fly tying and the materials that come from natural renewable resources in fur. So you have all, and again, a lot of these arguments came up during the Denver issue, the local um, measure there that they voted down, and I'm kind of beside myself that they keep coming to this. But again, I'm not surprised because that's That's what these groups do. They keep coming, and seeing, just like what we talked about 2 weeks ago with IP20 or last week. They just keep throwing crap at the wall to see what sticks. And eventually they start getting stuff to stick. I still don't understand the department's willingness to pick this up and move it forward. Other than we have seemingly corrupt, and I mean corrupt in the not like um stealing money corrupt. I mean corrupt as in like they're rotten with their philosophies and how they see to mission deliver as being commissioners. They're corrupt in that way.
And a lot of these arguments at their core are just emotion based arguments. They're
Right.
not running off of the North American model or the science based management. But it also comes either from a gross misunderstanding of what the North American model is or an intentional misrepresentation. One of the arguments we heard at the March Commission meeting against fur sales was that it went against the North American model because the North American model calls out bringing an end to markets for
Hmm.
wildlife. And that's why in our testimony, as well as in our recent TSV article, we pointed to the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies document on trapping. And that's linked in the article. It's easy to view. But they really highlight how current trapping markets and fur markets vary so differently from the retail markets of the past and how they are based on science based management. They're well monitored by the agencies, and it's quite different from what we were trying to prevent that was happening in the past.
The uniqueness of the material, um, even though it's renewable, because you're operating within seasons and bag limits for most of these fur bearing critters. Um, what am I trying to say here? Like the market is, to your point, the market is not flooded because there's just people out there trapping every fur bearer on the landscape, extrapolating them from the landscape. That's not how the whole management process works. So because of that, you wouldn't have this influx of product that would dilute the market and make these things so cheap. There's insane craftsmanship behind this. When you get to a finished product that is now garment ready or sellable for artisans, for craft making, for fly tying and such, it now it's taken that resource, that byproduct of that wildlife management to another step beyond what it originally was, right? There's no longer a functioning hide to the point that where it was just freshly case gone and fleshed out, right? This is now garment ready stuff. In a lot of states, to that argument about North American model will illustrate that and say, this has taken another step. This is a new product in it being garment ready and it being usable in other ways. So it does not violate that North American model. It doesn't violate the idea of selling wildlife products. It trumps that in that finished product phase.
And
So
it's
go ahead.
regulated and science based.
That's
It's
right.
no longer just a free for all where people are just going out and trapping with prejudice. It is highly regulated, down to how the tension on the plate, how large the plate can
Exactly
be.
right.
Like there's a whole lot of best management practices that have been worked out and that we are following throughout the states. The other argument we're seeing um, that I think needs some correction is it talks about how trapping will hurt the ecosystem and that it lowers biodiversity. But as you and I have seen, we had a phenomenal presentation during a recent NAS summit by Delta Waterfowl that went right into that
Mm.
on how trapping can actually help with biodiversity and wildlife populations. They specifically looked at the benefits to duck and waterfowl nesting sites when trapping was done for mesopredators, which are those fur bearers that predate at nest sites. So, trapping can actually help improve biodiversity in an ecosystem when it's done in coordination with the state agency through that science based management.
The same thing can be said for upland game bird species, ground nesting species as well. I mean, this has been proven out with the wild turkey and folks that are, engaged on wildlife management on their own properties. They within a season, they're seeing the results just by targeting raccoons alone and the other meso predators. But again, to your point, like you're able to target raccoons because of the equipment that is used that is not being used for any other fur bear on the landscape. So sometimes, a lot of times I feel like we're just talking to ourselves on this stuff, Marie. I mean, you and I are, not tooting our horns, but we're very knowledgeable about this. We go out in the landscape. We actually do this. We're not just, reciting and parroting stuff from peer reviewed articles or AFWA articles and publications. Like we go out in the landscape, we use these tools. We see the functionality of them. We know what works, what doesn't work, and why those best management practices are there through that trial and error, being out in the field and putting traps in the ground in the waterways and working different lots of land. And then, another consideration too, which if you were just a person listening to these arguments, the anti people, the petition bringers would make you think that there's a million trappers out in the landscape putting all this stuff out there. And, not only are the wild critters in peril, your dogs, your cats, and your little kids are, at any moment could step on a trap and be, hemmed up, which, first of all, the equipment doesn't do that. But second of all, there's just not many trappers out there. I don't know what the license count is for Colorado, but you know, uh, across the country, we have seen an uptick in folks wanting to do it, but we're not there. I want to say in my home state, we're at or just under 1,000, which is a great uptick from where we were 10 years ago when we were under 500 licensed trappers. And of those licensed trappers, who's actually going out on the landscape comes back to the service that is provided by the trappers. They go out there, they buy the equipment, they pay their own gas, they do all the travel, they buy a license to go do this. The state agency is not paying government people or government contractors at a far higher rate into the millions to do culvert work for beavers, to do predator mitigation around cattle and livestock and things like you have out west. Like again, I'm banging my head against the wall. We've said all this to each other before, but I hope somebody in the audience, a legislator is listening, ideally in Colorado, will sit and listen to this very frank conversation. And hopefully, Dawn will break over Marblehead here and be like, okay, we're kind of looking at this the wrong way.
Yeah, and we have said a lot of this before, but I think it bears repeating. And as
Has to.
frustrating as these things can be when they come forward, whether it's through petition or ballot measure or a bill that's brought forward, I think we need to start taking those not as frustrations, but as an opportunity
Mhm.
because the trapping community is one of the smallest in the sportsman's arena. And so their story and that message is not being shared widely. And this is an opportunity to help inform people and share the truth about trapping, to help them understand all the ways that we go through to make it as humane as possible, to utilize those best management practices, but also to really make sure that we're targeting the right populations in the right places so that we have a positive impact on the overall ecosystem. And I think this is a great opportunity to keep telling that story, both to the public and to the policymakers.
The disease control alone
Yes.
is huge because any of those illnesses, whether it be mange, dermatitis bug that knows no bounds and will go on any fur bear, um, different strains of distemper like back east that are making a huge impact in a negative way on fisher populations. And again, in the state of New Hampshire, 10, 15 years ago, you could take 10 or 15 statewide in a 30-day season, and now we're down to 2 statewide. There's other things at play there, but there is a strain of distemper. Without that management, one, how do we do the research? How do we do the studies? How do we get population estimates through trapping? It's the trappers that go out there and do that for this example. Um, what does that sickness do? Is it spreadable to other critters? And then the whole thing just gets compounded. And no agency could afford to hire enough biologists, fur bear biologists, to go out there on the landscape and perform the services that a trapper, a licensed trapper, a regulated trapper goes out and does on their own dime, because it is a connection to the land. It is a set of skills that a great majority of the sporting community, doesn't have. Because if you've been out, if you've trapped, if you run sets, you understand. And Marie, I know you understand exactly what I'm talking about. There is a whole level of understanding of all the other creatures that you may go after in a given hunting season that you learn about through trapping, and it makes you look at the woods and the waterways in a completely different way, and it makes you a better sportsman or sportswoman to go out there and be more effective in what you do in these other big game pursuits.
Yeah, and I think that of the groups we work with, trappers are some of the ones that know the landscape the best,
Yeah.
to the point where they will look at the whole forest, the whole picture right in front of them, and the knowledge they have of the animal, and they can set their trap knowing that is exactly where the animal will put its foot. It is fascinating the level of knowledge and appreciation they have for the wildlife and the habitat. One of the things you touched on, too, that I really want to point out, one of the arguments we're hearing in favor of these bans on predator hunting and trapping is that we don't need hunters and trappers to manage because nature will balance itself. That's an argument we hear over and over. And like you pointed out, when those populations go unregulated and we're not stepping in, one of the ways nature balances itself is either through starvation or disease. And neither of those are humane. It's an
Awful.
the awful way to go. Where with a trapper or a hunter, it's a much quicker, it's much nice. Like that would be a preferred item. And I think that debate is somewhere we have to get into. There, a lot of these groups just don't want human interaction in the wild, is essentially what it comes down to. But that human management, we are the best stewards of the land. And this is our opportunity to take that management and keep the populations as healthy and sustainable as possible.
I will tell you, probably 9 times out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, when I walk up to a set and I have something in it, most of the time that animal is laying down sleeping. Because of what you just said, human beings, aside from our cool opposable thumbs that allow us to do great things than any other critter out there and make tools and do stuff, we have self-awareness. We were able to think beyond instinct and that primitive brain. Where the critters out there are just they're just living. All they know how to do is eat, sleep, breathe, survive, and breed, right? I mean, that's what they do. There's no cognitive thoughts and strategy. They just go out there and do their thing. So they don't have that forethought of how to manage themselves. You know, when you walk up on a coyote or a red fox and it is just decimated by mange and its eyes are all squinty and it's all scaly looking, you know the picture I'm talking about if you're listening, and that critter dies, that mange doesn't go away. So when something dies, it attracts other critters and they come up and they sniff. And as soon as they get within that range of sniffing a carcass, that mange gets on them and now it's perpetuated. And it's like you said, it's an evil, awful way to die. Like I don't know how else to explain it. That's just long term suffering, especially when you start getting the colder months in the winter. Like forget it.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Nature can be brutal, that's for sure.
what are we looking at here? What are the next steps? Is the public still able to weigh in? How do we thwart this in Colorado?
Yeah, there is still an opportunity to submit written comment on the rules notice. Once that official language and the agenda comes forward for the commission meeting, and that's going to be in mid July, I believe July 17th. Um, that meeting is happening in Ignacio, Colorado. I believe there will be opportunities to testify on this agenda item, both in person or virtually. It all is going to depend on how many people attend that meeting, how much of the public comment they'll be able to get to. And I believe once that agenda comes forward, we'll also have another opportunity to make comment on the proposal when we see what Fish, Wildlife, and Parks has put together.
All right. Well, there you have it. We'll certainly get updates as we move forward. This is a bad idea. People need to be involved. Every single person that holds a license, even a fishing license, this is where you get the opportunity to hold up the rest of your community and not pick sides. We do that so often. It's unfortunate, but if you're just a straight up elk hunter or you just hunt friggin' deer, that's great. But understand that as trapping goes, the rest of you as dominoes will fall, and it'll definitely happen. It for sure will happen. There's, I think of Massachusetts, Arizona, where they're not allowed to use traps, and other regulations have come in limiting opportunity and access for other traditional means of take. So no one's safe from this, and the whole community really needs to rally around. trappers and fur handling and craftsmen and artisans, and support them, because someday you're going to need them to support you, no doubt. And oh, that's my soapbox rant on that. But we got to stand together on this stuff. It's not a you know they fall. It is what it is. It's just trappers. That's just not going to be the case. All right. Well, now that I've been murky dismal and cast a black cloud over this whole conversation, I am optimistic with you. I think we'll get it right. I think the people will get it right. They've already proven that in the recent past on a big stage. There's a lot of online presence we're seeing around this socially and otherwise, people, heeding the call and rallying. So, you know, uh, hopefully we get it right, and then people see clearer ways, and then let the professionals continue to dictate. But that commission's got to get squared away. And again, I mean, I know they're governor appointed, but people do have a say. Your sportsmen's clubs have a say. The hunting public and fishing public have a say and should be engaging. And again, and maybe they just don't know it, Marie. Maybe they don't know how that those people get appointed if you're not really wonky about this stuff. But better pay attention, because those decisions are getting made by people that are not friendly to our heritage or way of life, and they just be happy to see it all go away. And if there's no opposition to it, they can make it happen pretty quick.
Yep. And I see these opportunities. Yes, it is frustrating and it can feel the kind of doom and gloom and gray. But this is just, again, another opportunity for us to
Yeah,
spread educational awareness and to share our story and our voice. So I think we
every
need to take
opportunity
this
we
as that
get.
opportunity.
Yeah, we gotta take it. I told you this would go way longer, and I'm glad we only had a few other articles. But this is it's a topic that's definitely near and dear to my heart, your heart, and
Yep.
it's we got to give a bigger voice to this part of our community, because we don't have it with continuity. And your good work out there and the coalitions you work with and you've built are going to help fight this off, no doubt. And we will look forward to some good news out of this, I hope. And you'll see to it, Marie. Thank you so much for being here and sharing this story.
Thank you so much.
All right, we'll talk to you next time. All right, friends, that's our show. Don't forget the Hunt Fish 250 special podcast series. Go check that all out. Special drop tomorrow. Join me as I speak with and visit with Johnny Morris and his son, John Paul JP Morris of Bass Pro Shops, founder, and his son, as we talk about legacy, what hunting and fishing means to that family, passing that down, and then big picture stuff of the responsibility of making sure this heritage and what we do, these traditions are entrusted to the next generations, how to get there. It's a great conversation. Just listen to them talk. It's just some storytelling and some good guys just chopping it up. And I think y'all will enjoy it. So check that special drop out right before the holiday there, and enjoy that. With that, be safe out on the waterways, guys. Get a line wet if you can. Enjoy the great outdoors. 250 years of celebrating, and then there's a lot to be grateful, thankful, and you you look around at the headlines outside of our space, man, it could be downright depressing. But no one's sad when you're catching bass or bluegill or wherever you're at, or on a wave runner, or just on a pontoon boat taking a ride looking at nature. So have a safe Independence Day weekend. Enjoy it all. Say a prayer for our country, and we'll do it all again next time. Remember, CSF is your inside connection outdoor legislation. We'll see you next time. So long. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review, filling in those 5 stars where available, sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Together, we can protect the outdoor sports we love and continue to keep you informed wherever you are. That's it for this week. Until next time, we'll see you later.